everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a steak salad with some fresh lo mein that we just picked from our garden. And we're gonna whip up some pumpkin scones. I know it's not pumpkin spice season, but I've been kind of craving pumpkin scones. So we're gonna whip those up and we're gonna prep a dough for focaccia and make a homemade dressing. So let's start with our scones over here. We're gonna start with our dry ingredients and then we'll mix in our wet ones. So we're going to start with some flour, and we need about 2.5 cups of flour. Let me grab my little tablespoon measure out of there. So, shake it off. So we've got 1 and 2, and now we need a half. There we go. So we've got 2.5 cups of flour. Then we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And we want to make sure you firmly pack it in so that way you get the right sweetness factor. So 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Get those little crumblies off of me. We're going to do 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. This is a slightly different recipe from my regular scones because the pumpkin in it. So I'm got to remember exactly what it is. So 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder because the pumpkin puree adds a bit of liquid. So you got to alter things a little bit. So 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. There we go. And now we are going to add in some spices. We're going to add in a teaspoon of cinnamon. We'll also be making a brown sugar cinnamon glaze. So we'll get a little bit more spice from there. So a teaspoon of cinnamon. I like to make it heaping because I love my cinnamon. And then we're going to do 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice seasoning. Spices, pumpkin spice. So 1 and 2. And now we're going to add in a teaspoon of salt. Ooh, not that much. Came out fast. I mean, I love my salt, but not that much salt. Okay, now we're just going to give this a good mix. And we're just kind of mixing those ingredients together so that we can cut our butter into the dry ingredients here. So just a good little smush around. If your spices are older, you might need to use a little bit more to have the nice kind of spiciness to your scones. I remember one time, it was many Christmases ago, we were making Swedish gingerbread cookies, and the recipe was in Swedish. My mom had abandoned us and gone to bed early and left us to, at a time before internet was really a thing, to translate the Swedish recipe and figure out what the spices were. And so we, of course, probably didn't measure anything right, but then the spices were so old, they had no flavor to it. So we made the pepparkakor, which is the Swedish gingerbread cookies, had no flavor because they were really dulled out. And I'm sure we mismeasured things and misput spices in because things change in different languages. But she was always like, oh, you should use new ones after that. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. They dull out after a while. They don't go bad. They just need to use a little bit more to get the kick because they do become a bit more mild.
And things tend to sit at your mom's.
Yes, things do tend to sit at my mom's house. Every couple of years, I do like a major, clean up and get rid of things. And it's crazy. The last one I did last year when she was getting her kitchen renovated, and I found stuff and spices and things in her pantry that were 20 plus years old. Things that had made the move from Iowa to Nashville, and she moved there in 98. So it was pretty bad. I was like, I think it's time to let go the Hy-Vee spices. There are no Hy-Vees here. Okay, we're going to cut this 1/2 cup of butter into here. using our pastry cutters. You could use a food processor if you want. I'm just going to go through and pick out any of these. You just don't want any pieces that are bigger than a pea when you do this. So just a good little choppy chop. It's not too hard. If you don't have a pastry cutter or a food processor, you can do it the old-fashioned way using two knives. But these are going to be our pumpkin scones. We're going to do a brown sugar glaze, and then we're going to have them with our steak salad. I had a bunch of romaine. It's been growing really well, and so we decided to pick that up and do a nice kind of light steak salad for lunch today. We'll make a homemade dressing, a homemade ranch. Okay, nice and cut into it. Get all that butter out. You don't want to lose the butter. That's what makes the scone so delicious. Okay, now let's put our dry ingredients to the side. Let's get our wet ingredients going. So we're going to need a half a cup of sourdough discard. There we go. Must have gotten blooming and stuck on there. Give it a little stir. And we want a half a cup. And it can be active. It can also be ready to be fed. Mine is definitely ready to be fed, so we can make some more bread. I've got a loaf chilling in the fridge to bake up soon. And so we've got our half a cup of our discard. Now we need a half a cup of pumpkin puree. And you don't want the ones that have already been seasoned. You want them just plain. There we go. I got the can opener to work for me. Normally, it does not like to work for me, but it's typically because I'm using it to open up tomato paste, and those little cans, they just don't like me.
You have a question. Do you ever eat regular bread, or do you only make your own?
I do buy regular sandwich bread. I keep saying I need to get into making sandwich breads, but I do buy the regular ones. I have one crazy kid in my house that does not like sourdough. I know, it's crazy. But Torin is not a fan of sourdough bread. We need a half a cup of pumpkin puree. So I just kind of eyeballed it there. I think I took a smidge much. And so I do buy some sandwich breads, but any of the breads that we eat with dinner, I always make myself. But I have sandwich bread, especially if I'm making a meatball. I like to use that soft yeast bread for it because sourdough doesn't quite work well for like a meatball. Okay, and we're going to add in our egg. One egg down. And now we need vanilla. We're going to add in a teaspoon of vanilla. Where's my teaspoon? That's a half. There we go. Let's give this a nice little mix, and then we'll add in our cream. Of course, I need a spoon. Let's take my pumpkin pie spoon. So we'll mix this up, and then we're going to add in a fourth a cup of cream. This is going to be our wet base that we'll be adding into our scone, our dry base to make our scone.
Why do you always mix the dry ingredients separate?
For the scones, not all recipes do you have to do it, but for scones and biscuits, you want to minimize the amount of kneading or playing with the dough because it will turn to a stiff product. So if I mix all the wet ingredients together, all the dry, and then I can add them at the same time and minimize the amount of mixing, it's going to leave you with a better product in the end.
You got a question? How'd the muffins turn out after the mishap?
They turned out excellent. They were great. They were delicious. I think we only have like 5 left or so. So they were wonderful. They're so rich though. So like Jack and Teddy will share one. But they've turned out perfect. I was surprised. I was like sitting here and I'm like, oh, please don't. Because sometimes, the baking is crucial in a cake. Luckily, they were very forgiving. I've never done that before. So it was kind of funny. It's probably going to make it into some bloopers or whatnot, but I don't even know how I did it. I must have somehow, when I was setting the timer, just cleared off the oven out of, habit. Okay, now we've got our dry, and I'm going to use a fork for this because, again, we don't want to cream our mixture here or over mix it. So we're going to add it in. And these are going to be a bit more wet than my traditional scones that I make because of the pumpkin puree. So we did add more flour to kind of counteract that, but you want to, it's, you know, it's, you just have to be a bit more delicate with it so that you don't over mix it. So I'm going to use my fork to kind of create this nice little dry shag. There. It's kind of like when we made our strawberry scones, you know, they're just a little bit more moist. There, perfect. But you need that pumpkin flavor. So we're going to take it out, and then we're going to do our press and folds to get those flaky layers. No kneading. There we go. But it is a little bit more moist, so we can have to be a little bit more delicate with it. So it won't take nearly as many presses and folds as our regular one, but just be careful not to knead it. I'm trying to get as many flaky layers into it as possible. Grab all these dry bits on the side up because we want to have it be as layery as possible. I'm not sure that's actually a word, but here we go. Okay, now I'm going to divide this into two, and we're going to make our little pucks. And there we go. We'll be making also a delicious brown sugar and cinnamon glaze to go over the top because I just think pumpkin scones and brown sugar glaze go well together. And I'm a fan of brown sugar glaze over maple glaze. A lot of people like to use a maple glaze, but I've got to be in the mood for maple syrup. Okay, looks like these are looking good. Trying to grab any of those bits that are stuck. I've got my parchment paper lined baking sheet here, and we're just going to slide. I'm going to slide my pastry cutter right underneath here to pick up each puck and transfer it. I find it's better to shape on the counter then transfer versus shaping on the parchment paper because you'll just have little bits of crumbs to the side that can burn, and it's just a little bit easier. So we've got our two pucks. You're aiming for about 1 inch in thickness. Now we're going to go through and we're going to cut these guys. So we'll cut them into quads and then into eighths. And then we'll let them move out just a smidge so that they can crisp up on their sides. So I like to make mini scones versus really big scones because A, you can eat more, and B, they cook up a little bit nicer. A lot of times when you do the bigger scones, you have to bake them a little bit longer, which means your ends, like they dry out faster. So yes, you'll have a nice middle, but your ends will be more dried. So the little ones I tend to find bake up just nicer. And they're not a full commitment. You can have a little one as a snack. There we go. So we've got our scones here. We're going to brush with a little bit of cream and sprinkle with a little bit of sugar. And that just gives them a nice crush, but I want to get that off of my hands. Let's grab a little teeny tiny bowl. And you just need a smidge of cream, not much, like a tablespoon max. And this is going to be, it's going to give you a golden color, which you kind of don't need so much with the pumpkin, but it will help the sugar adhere to it, and it will give it a nice little sugar crust on the top. Scones are sweeter than a biscuit if you've never had one, but they're not as sweet as a cookie. So they're that kind of middle ground. They give you that nice little crunch that a cookie can give you if you're kind of craving that, but they aren't as rich and sweet. I think they're just lovely. But it's funny, when I was a kid, I went to this daycare, and every spring or whatnot, we'd do this grand tea party. So, you had to dress up in fancy clothes. And then for like the days leading up to it, we would bake all of these little tea party foods. So we'd make scones every year, and then tea sandwiches and all that. And I mean, clearly it's like a core memory for me because I absolutely loved it. But we always had the scones and I love them. We'll sprinkle a little bit of, since I got my brown sugar out, we'll sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar over them. Just a nice sprinkle. And that's going to give you a nice little sugar crunch on the top, so that if you don't like the glaze, this is how you would prepare them. But we will glaze them up, at least some of them. I know my son, Torrin, doesn't like glazes, so I'll probably leave some of them undone for him because he's not a big frosting guy. Let's go pop these in the oven. I have it preheated to 400 degrees. And these are going to bake a smidge longer than my normal recipe bakes for about 18 minutes. These are going to go for 20 because of that pumpkin. It's a bit more moist, which means you just need a smidge longer to cook it so that it's not doughy. So let me set my timer here. I'm going to assure the oven is still on. It is still on. Okay, made it past. Sometimes the simplest things are the hardest. And let's get our steak going and marinating and then we'll start prepping it. Actually, change that. Let's get our ovens or our veggies in the ovens roasting for our steak thing. Apparently, I can't speak right now.
People in the chat reminding you to keep the oven on.
I know. It's the little things. It's hard to bake something when the oven's not on. When I was a kid, we always did, I don't know if you ever did this, but in the summer, we'd make a solar oven. And this is in Iowa where it never got blazing hot. So it never really truly worked. I feel like in Tennessee, we could probably cook some real stuff here. But I said, outside of that, I don't think it's going to cook on its own.
You have a question? Are you going to post the recipe for the scones?
So typically we post the videos after we're done streaming. So we upload them. So that is the best way to get like a recipe. I do have a couple recipe cards that we post for everyone, but most of our recipe cards we do put in for our subscribers because they do take me a bit more work to do. And it takes away time for my family versus this is just cooking my meals for my family. So we do occasionally also send out some freebies. Like I think our last little freebie, we sent out the 1 hour challah bread for everyone. And there are some previous scone recipe posted, but we do always upload our videos. So you can always recreate the recipes by just finding that video and watching it again. I do go through all of the ingredients and the steps to cook it. So you should be able to do it at home as well.
And the videos are transcribed.
Yes, and the videos are transcribed. So you can always just read the transcriptions too as you're going through. And once you make my scones, this one's slightly different recipe, but I kind of use the base recipe for most of my stuff, my scones and my muffins. We chopped up some peppers here. We're going to roast these in the oven. So just kind of did a messy chop on them, nothing super fancy on them. I want them a little bit bigger because when you're eating a salad, you want a little bit more substance. And then we're going to roast up the red onions. Now I'm not doing a super long roast on these, nice, kind of like a nice little crisp up for them because I like the little bit of their crunch in it. And the onions, I just love onions. So we'll add the red onions in. You could also throw in, if you ever want to do this home, zucchini, yellow squash. Those are all great things to do a quick roast in the oven for a steak salad. When we break these apart, I'm going to just take out the cores because they're not as nice to eat. And then we're going to drizzle with a little bit of olive oil. And a little bit of garlic salt. Give them a nice little toss here. And then we'll spread these out and we're going to pop them in the oven just right underneath our scones so that they can kind of crisp up a little bit, cook up. So pop these in. And if I'm baking them on the scones, so whenever I bake something with a companion in the oven, the thing that is more delicate gets the heat and the time. So the scones are more delicate than this. So these are going to go in and they'll roast right underneath. Well, you got a nice little peak there going on. But if you're doing some things, you know what I mean? So like fish is more delicate than vegetables. So that would be the heat that you used for that. So for these, the vegetables are more hardy and can withstand. So they're going to cook at the level of the scones. Okay, now let's get our steak cut and marinated up. And then we'll get our salad prepping. And then we've got to make glaze. So these are just some petite sirloins I have. I think we're going to do kind of cubes like we did last week, because cutting the strips of these and then sauteing them won't make them as nice. Now, if I were going to grill them up, I would leave them as a full, and then sauteing them won't make them as nice. Now, if I were going to grill them up, I would leave them as a fillet. So we're going to just kind of leave them as cubes and do little steak bites in our salads. And that way they'll kind of cook up nicely. Versus if you do the strips, then they won't be nice and tender. But if I'm like sitting there, I was thinking about, whipping them out on a grill. But again, we're in the process of kind of redoing our outdoor kitchen, making one. And so it's kind of in a chaos there. So I was like, oh, we'll just do steak bites on there. Otherwise, you could just throw these on a grill and then to medium rare and then slice them up. Okay. Let's get these. Just a few cubing here. And for this, you're going to want to stick. You could use any of the nicer cuts of steaks for this. Ribeye, sirloin, New York strips, they all work. I will say the petite sirloin here is a great affordable ones because they're typically the ends of the sirloin ones. So you don't have the prettiest cuts on them. So they work really well for cubing up. There we go. Just getting them all into kind of a nice cube, bite-sized cube. Oh, one slipped on me. There we go. Throw that little bit of fat away. This one's got a big chunk of fat too. I'll leave a little bit of fat on them because we will saute them, but if it is a huge chunk of fat, you want to trim that away. Okay. Let's give these a little drizzle of Worcestershire sauce. The acid, you don't want to soak it, just a little drizzle. The acid in here will give it just kind of pairs with that fat and makes it nice and tender. But the real trick is not to overcook your steak when you're doing steak bites. It's really easy to overcook it. So what I typically do is I'll sear it high on one side, and then it's just a quick 30-second sear on the other to give you that medium rare. I'm going to grab my pepper, that's salt, and a little sprinkle of pepper here. And grab our tongs. And we're going to give them a little toss, and we'll coat them all again on the other side as well. This way they have a nice little flavor on there. So just a smidge of Worcestershire. You don't want it to be soaked in it, because when you cook them up in the pan, you want them to sear fast. And if they're in a heavy liquid marinade, then they won't get a crispy sear on it. Nice little shake of that, of garlic salt, and a little pinch of black pepper. Okay, we will let these sit here. We'll have them go in just a second. Let's prep up some garlic butter that we can saute our steaks in. So, in the process of still getting some garlic, so bear with me as I get some of these. I always have garlic in my fridge outside. It lasts forever, so it's always a backup emergency, and I do a couple sourdough ones. So, when in doubt, we always have this. I don't have to go crazy small on this because I'm just really using it to marinate the butter that we're gonna kind of getting a nice flavor on our steak bites. So you don't have to kind of mince it up because we won't be eating these. There we go. But you do want to get off the skins. There we go. So just a handful here. And we're going to give them just a slight little dice up. That way they infuse out their flavor. But I'm not going to go crazy and do a super mince on them. There. Okay. For our steak bites, let me grab some butter. I do always like to cook my steak in butter. So most of the time I use olive oil for cooking, but for steak, butter. Butter gives you a great little crusty seasoning on it. Those milk fats kind of crisp up. I don't need quite that much. Well, we're all over the butter now. So we're going to let it melt, and then we're going to add in our garlic. And I'm also going to add in some green onions. I'm going to cut off the very bottoms, and then we're going to chop up these 4 here. And I'm going to save the tops for our dressing. But the bottoms are going to go into our pan to saute to give that butter a kind of a green, like an oniony garlic flavor to it, which will be lovely. And then the rest is going to go into our homemade ranch dressing. So we'll have these ready to saute up. And I guess while we're waiting, let's see, should we start? Let's start the glaze so we can glaze our scones as soon as they come out. We don't need much. We'll use the remaining butter over here for our glaze for our scones. We're going to do a brown sugar glaze, which means we need to heat up the butter. We need to melt the butter and the sugar and the cream together. Otherwise, your glaze will have a gritty texture to it. So let me grab my brown sugar. You'll end it with powdered sugar, but you want to use, you're going to use about a half a cup here to give it that nice rich flavor. Just swirl this around. And then we'll use a little bit of cream. And this is going to make the base for our glaze, which we will then thicken up with powdered sugar. So about 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. And where's my cinnamon? We need about a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And this is gonna just add a lovely flavor to it as well. It goes, so just a smidge. And let me grab a spoon here to mix this up. And I wanna get that going. But we wanna just essentially, once that butter has melted and the sugar is no longer grainy, so it's dissolved, that's when we know our kind of base for our brown sugar glaze is ready. Okay, we'll let that sit there. We've got our butter going. I'm going to turn it down because butter, if you keep it on high heat, it will burn because of the milk solids in it. So I'm going to turn it down to low now because we kind of want it to infuse with our garlic and our green onions. We'll grab a spatula right here so I can stir it around and let those flavors soak in, and then we'll turn up the heat when we're ready to cook our steaks, to cook them on high. But to infuse this butter, we're going to do it on low first. That way it brings out all those flavors. Okay, let's get to our salad here. We'll do our dressing too. So I told you I picked a bunch of lovely leaves from our garden. I got my salad spinner out since they're ready to be clean. So if you've never seen a salad spinner in action, it's actually pretty cool. We're going to throw our arugula in there as well, because if we're going to dress them all up, we're going to dress it all up nice right now. So a good handful of arugula with our romaine. And then what you're going to do is we'll rinse it, give it like a thorough rinse under the water, and then we're going to spin them clean. This is I will say, the best way to get home-picked greens and herbs clean. You can rinse and rinse, but they never work as well. Also, leeks do really well in here. And then we're just going to spin a little bit I always get rid of some of the water, but you see, you get the first base of water out, and you can just see how much dirt you get out of there just doing that. So we've got our first round done. We're going to rinse again. But I will say, if you grow your own garden, these are great to have. I've had this one from IKEA for a while. We'll spin it out. And even look, the second washout, just how much you can get. Okay. We're going to give it one more big spin. You want to spin it until your leaves are dry because you don't want to have soggy leaves in your salad. There we go. That should be ready. Let's look over here at our glaze. Our butter is melting nice, and I can feel as I stir it, I don't really have much of a grit. So we're going to remove it from our heat, and we're going to let that remaining butter melt. I don't want it to turn to candy, so you don't want it to boil. Otherwise, you can have a crunchiness to your glaze. So you really just want to do it until you no longer feel that grit. And it's fine if the butter isn't, because it will melt all the way in just a second here. And we're going to add in our powdered sugar. So, and essentially we're going to add it in until it gets to the consistency of, I always say, Elmer's glue. So I always start with a half a cup at a time. Or I will say maybe molasses. It has to be a thick kind of pour. We're going to give it a good mix. I'm going to actually switch out for my whisk here because I want it to whisk nicely. And you could use a hand mixer too for it. There we go. So we're getting a nice kind of a thickness to it. Still a little runny. So we're going to add in our other half to it. But we don't want it so thick that it's like a frosting. So if you ever do make it too thick, what you can do is add a bit more cream to it, because you want it to have a nice slow drizzle. So I might need to add a smidge of cream, but we'll see once it cools. There we go. Oh, it's kind of drizzling nicely now. I'll add a smidge of cream. I need it to drizzle a little bit more. That's why I always say start with less sugar and add it in, because you can't really take the sugar out. So you can always add a little bit of liquid to it to get it to the right one, but it's easier to go slow. There we go. So now we've got a nice slow drizzle. This is perfect for when we're going to drizzle over our scones. So I'm glad that is nice and ready. Let's clear this over here. Let's get back to making our salad. Okay. One more quick pull. So we have our salad that is nice and clean. This is our arugula and our romaine that we picked in the garden. So I'm going to add it right here. If you were going to be storing this for future use, if you picked your own garden, then you would want to put it on paper towels to let it dry. Otherwise, it can get soggy in your fridge. But we're just going to give it a chop over. We had lots of, I will say, I planted 4 romaine plants this year, and I will say they're pretty blooming right now, which is lovely. And then arugula, I feel like arugula always goes really well with thing. But let's go grab our scones out of the oven. And I assure you, the oven is still on. So, okay. Beautiful. Look at our gorgeous pumpkin scones here. So we're going to take these out of the oven. They're cooked at 400 degrees. They're nice and warm. And this is when you want to drizzle them with our brown sugar glaze. So you want to do them when they're hot. It's hot so that it melts over nicely over them. So I'm going to take a spoon and we are going to drizzle our brown sugar and cinnamon glaze over our pumpkin sourdough scones that we made using our sourdough discard. Half a cup of pumpkin pie spice, brown sugar, fresh butter, cream, and they're just delicious. It's one of those snacks that I know they're meant for the fall, but you just kind of crave them. And my kids have been really craving them recently. And I was like, you know what? I think I have a can of pumpkin in there. But nice drizzle over and delicious. Look at that, nice thick. And because we're drizzling it on hot, it will ooze over and just leave a nice kind of melted crust. Okay. I'm gonna leave half of them right there undrizzled because I'm not sure if Torrin wants his with frosting or not, but we can always pop them on. Okay, I'm gonna turn up my steak now or my skillet now to nice and hot. Get it so we can add and cook it in. But do you see how my garlic and my green onions are just toasted a little bit? Perfect, not over cooked. We're gonna add in our steak bites. Try to get them to where they're not really touching. I'm gonna put my outer edges on first because they cook slightly slower than my middle one. So we'll get them cooking first and then we'll add it in the middle of our skillet. If you have more steak bites than your skillet can handle, do not just pop them all in there. Do it in batches. I'm fairly certain that I can get these all in here without overcrowding them too much. But if you overcrowd and you're trying to get that nice sear on it, when that happens is you're gonna get like a soggy steak, like it will seize. But these are our sirloin, petite sirloin tip or bits that we cut up. And I'll say I can start to smell it. It smells so good. You can smell that garlic and those onions. Okay. Haha. We got them in without too much overcrowding. They all have a little bit of space and a bit to sear up on, which is what we want. And we're going to let them cook here for about 1.5 to 2 minutes until you're going to nice crisp edge. And then we just do a quick flip over. Okay. Let's put our lettuces in our big bowl over here. Break up any of the big ones, but this is going to be for our salad. There we go. Let's bring this a little bit closer. And then I had, let's see, let me grab a small paring knife here. I have some cucumber. I had a very little cucumber left over, but I was like, oh, this will be great in there. We have our roasted veggies that we'll also add. We're going to add in our fresh cucumbers, just a smidge. And then I have some fresh tomatoes.
You have a question, what's the bowl made out of?
I want to say it's like an aluminum bowl with an enamel coating on it. I really like bowls like this, especially for making big batches of dough or puppy chow. I love like the food puppy chow, not like for animals, but it's a good, not a high bowl, but a low one. I like it. I got it on Amazon. So if I can find something on Amazon, it's a win. Don't make me go out to a store. Okay. Let's get our tomatoes chopped up in here. Oh, Grace, Bruni, Loki. I know. Did you guys see somebody walking by? Oh, Poppy. Okay. Let's got our tomatoes in here. And we're watching. I got my mom's dog here. And I got my aunt's dog here. So they're all barking at some mailman, I'm sure, or a person walking. We're going to add some fresh avocado. And do a nice little go through. and scoop it out. And so I feel like avocado goes really well with steaks. We got the seed pit out of here. We'll cube this up and add it in there as well. And voila. We've got our lovely avocado, our tomatoes, some cucumbers. I have some fresh little mozzarella cheese balls. And then our steak, if you can see right here, this is where we're starting to get that syrup. Well, we'll do our quick little thing and it'll be just perfect. We're about to flip them. Let's add our mozzarella balls. These are into our salad. These are marinated, but they'll be popping with the steak. Okay, give my hands a quick wash, and then we're gonna flip. We're gonna toss our meat chunks here. And look, we've got these lovely brown seared edges on here, which will be perfect. And now what we're gonna do is just a really quick sear on the other side, and then we'll remove them from the heat because our steak will still continue to cook while we're things. And then we're going to go grab our roasted veggies out of the oven because those should be just about done. And then all we have to do is make our dressing and our salad is done. Okay, we'll let them cook for a second. Let's go grab our roasted veggies. So in the oven, we have our red onions and our peppers. We got them up nice, soft, nice little roast on them, oven roast that we'll toss in our salad in just a second. We'll let them cool down just a smidge. I don't want to put them in there when they're piping hot or they might wilt the lettuce. Okay. I'm going to turn off our steaks here because I want them to be cooked at a medium rare, which is our family's favorite. If you like them longer, you can cook them a little bit longer. Okay. We're going to whip up our dressing and we'll be ready to plate in no time. Okay, let me grab a spoon. We're going to make a homemade ranch. So I've got some mayo, some buttermilk, and then some fresh herbs from our garden. So add in. Got to make enough for everyone. So about, this looks like I've got a 1/3 cup of mayo, which we'll then do with an equal part of buttermilk. So a 1/3 cup of buttermilk with a 1/3 cup. Actually, it's at a half, so we can do a half and a half. I love my little salad shaker here of buttermilk, which will give you that nice ranch, delicious kind of flavoring to it. The buttermilk ranch is just so nice. We're going to mince up. Let me slide these herbs off. But we're going to mince up our veggies here into our salad. So I've got some fresh oregano in here, and we're going to mince our fresh oregano with our basil, and then I have some parsley. So I'm just going to peel off our edges for our oregano, and then the rest we're going to mince up. There we go. So fresh oregano, fresh basil, and fresh parsley and green onions, and we're going to mince these all together into a lovely kind of into our salad. We'll add a little bit of garlic salt and and some onion powder, and then our ranch will be made and we'll be able to serve up. So let's do a really nice mince here. And you want to make sure you got it fine so that it's not, you don't have like big chunks of leaves in your dressing. But this is a great way to use fresh herbs to kind of make a homemade ranch dressing. It's almost like our dressing that I had growing up in like Germany, where it was there, but it was delicious. So we're going to add in our minced herbs, and we've got a lot of them. And we're going to add in a little bit of balsamic vinegar. So just about a tablespoon. That will give it a little bit of a kick. Our garlic powder, or onion powder, you want about a teaspoon. And then our garlic salt, about a teaspoon as well. So a couple good shakes. And now we're going to give this a nice stir. or a nice shake. And then we're going to be able to serve up dinner or lunch. Okay.
You have a question? Where do you get most of your recipes from?
Most of them I just make myself. I've been cooking for such a long time that I know how to cook certain dishes, and then I just kind of create it on the spot. Okay, let's add in our roasted veggies to our salad here. So we've got our roasted veggies in, and we're going to put them right there. Okay, and now let me grab a bowl, and we are going to plate up. Actually, we'll do a plate because we can have our scone on the side. Looks like we've got an Amazon delivery. Always something being delivered here. Okay, let's grab some tongs. Loki, Bruni, Poppy, Grace. It's crazy. Okay, so here, look at our beautiful salad. We're going to serve up a nice big chunk of our salad with our steak bites on top. Just another. And then we're going to drizzle with our homemade ranch dressing. And of course, let's not forget our pumpkin scone for dessert. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes, you can just go to that link, find the video, watch it again, and recreate everything at home. Hopefully cook along with me again. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.